In this transmission, you will confront the catastrophic reality of your own biological subversion and discover how the relentless flood of free high-velocity digital garbage has systematically devalued your internal currency of drive, making you chemically incapable of pursuing the millions you claim to desire because your brain has been hijacked by a simulation of success that provides the neurochemical rewards of a conqueror for the effort of a scavenger. We initiate the first part of the dopamine devaluation protocol by identifying the precise mechanism of your neural enslavement, where the soft man is transformed into biological sludge through the constant ingestion of cheap dopamine, which is the high fructose corn syrup of the information age, designed to keep the meat in a state of perpetual sedation and false satiety, while the architect remains the only entity capable of maintaining the dopaminergic delta required for high-stakes resource capture. You must understand that your brain did not evolve for the infinite resolution of the digital screen, but for the sparse and high-friction environment of the ancestral savanna, where every drop of dopamine was a hard-earned reward for activities that ensured your genetic survival, such as the hunt, the conquest, and the expansion of the tribe. But today, the algorithm provides you with the illusion of the hunt every 15 seconds through a glass rectangle that requires zero metabolic expenditure and zero strategic risk. This creates a state of neural inflation where the value of the hit is decimated because the supply is infinite and the cost is zero, meaning that your brain no longer recognizes the incentive to act in the physical world because it is already full of the synthetic chemicals of success provided by the biosludge of the content cycle. The reason you cannot sit down to build your empire or execute your strategy is that your reward circuitry is currently throttled by the high-frequency noise of the scroll, and your prefrontal cortex has been put into a state of hibernation as the constant stream of high-contrast fast-cut imagery induces a hypnotic trance that mimics the theta wave state of sleep while you are technically awake, and this digital trance creates a saccadic suppression where your eye's natural ability to track complex patterns in the environment is replaced by a rhythmic downward flicker of the thumb, which desensitizes the neural pathways responsible for foveal focus and peripheral awareness, making you money blind in a world of information arbitrage. You are essentially participating in a predatory simulation where you are the prey being harvested for your attention by multinational algorithms designed to keep your anterior cingulate cortex in a state of perpetual sedation. And you must realize that every reel, every short, and every free piece of content you consume is a microdose of biological fraud that sells you the feeling of the result to prevent you from doing the work of the process. And the result is a generation of men who know everything but own nothing because their eyes are trained to recognize the aesthetic of wealth but not the geometry of wealth creation. The soft man believes he is learning or relaxing while he scrolls, but in reality he is undergoing a chemical lobotomy where his ambition is being drained to fuel the ad revenue engines of the digital farm, and he becomes a broke observer while the architect is a wealthy operator who treats his dopamine as holy capital and refuses to spend it on anything that does not increase his genetic capital or his resource pile. To reclaim your sovereignty, you must implement a dopamine fast where you purposefully look at the world without the filter of the screen until the colors of reality start to look more vivid than the pixels of the simulation, and you begin to notice the friction in every transaction, the inefficiency in every service, and the unserved needs of every individual you encounter, which is the foundation of economic vision and the only cure for money blindness. The architect understands that wealth is the result of delayed gratification and high-friction execution, and that by starving the brain of cheap dopamine, you upregulate your D2 receptors, making the hard work of building a business feel exciting and rewarding once again, because you have restored the biological delta between your current 0 point and your future citadel. You must realize that free content is the most expensive thing you will ever own because it costs you the energy of your will and the velocity of your future, and the soft man is currently paying for his entertainment with his freedom, while the architect is buying his freedom with his boredom and his discipline. We must deconstruct the metabolic enslavement of the middle class where they are programmed to consume poison that creates inflammation, which leads to cognitive fog, which makes them easy to manipulate through cheap dopamine. And your mission is to deprogram your biology with the same violent clarity you use to build your empire, because the body is the hardware and the mind is the software. And if the hardware is leaking energy, the software will always glitch. You are currently in a war for your own attention, and the algorithm is a more dangerous opponent than any competitor, because the algorithm knows your biological weaknesses, and it knows exactly what frequency of light and what tempo of sound will keep you in the consumer cage of the digital slum. The architect breaks the cage by reclaiming the visual sovereignty and realizing that the most valuable real estate in the world is not in Manhattan or Dubai, but in the neural pathways of his own focus. And by the time you reach the end of this part, you must understand that dopamine devaluation is a choice to remain weak and broke in a world of infinite opportunity, and you must choose now to exit the trance and enter the hunt. This is the end of part 1 of the bioeconomic sovereignty protocol, and you must prepare your neural circuitry for the high voltage realignment of the second part, where we will discuss the construction of the high friction empire and the totalitarian control of the sensory input. We initiate the second part of the dopamine devaluation protocol by shifting from the diagnostic of the sludge to the architecture of the counterstrike, where you must learn to weaponize boredom and engineered friction to rebuild the neural walls of your empire and ensure that your dopaminergic system is tuned exclusively to the frequency of achievement and resource capture, because in the final evolution of the sovereign individual, the only high that matters is the high of systemic dominance and the physical manifestation of the will. You must understand that the human brain possesses a finite amount of decision capital and visual attention each day, and every time you process a 15-second clip of useless noise, you are burning through the glucose and neurotransmitters that were meant to be used for the infiltration of the market and the expansion of your personal brand. And this micro drain is what keeps you in the money blindness, because by the time you actually sit down to work, your internal CPU is already throttled by information overload. The architect practices visual minimalism, where he treats his eyes as precision instruments that are only uncovered when there is a mission to execute. And this means that you do not browse the internet and you do not scroll through social media. You enter the digital space with a search query or an upload protocol, and you exit the moment the task is complete to prevent the saccadic fatigue that makes the world look dull and uninspiring. You must realize that the wealthy are informationally dense, while the poor are informationally diluted, and dopamine devaluation is the result of being diluted by too many low-value data points. And to become dense, you must ignore 99.9% of the world's input so that you can focus 100% on the 0.1% that generates resource capture. This is the Pareto principle of vision, and it is the secret to why the architect can see $1 million deal in a 5-minute conversation while the soft man misses it, because the architect's filters are calibrated for signal while the soft man's filters are clogged with sludge. We must analyze the dopamine cortisol seesaw, where the high of the cheap content is followed by the low of the reality check, and this cycle keeps you in a state of emotional instability that prevents the cold calculation required for financial dominance, whereas the architect is emotionally flat during the work block because he is visually focused and he does not seek entertainment from his work. He seeks dominance and equity. This professional affect is what allows you to see the opportunity hidden in the hard work that the soft man avoids because his brain is too spoiled by the easy dopamine to handle the high friction immersion required for real-world results. You must understand the neurology of the hook, where you learn to see the psychological open loops that make people click and watch, and this seeing is only possible when you are outside the loop, looking in as a provider of the signal rather than in the loop as a consumer of the noise. This is the shift from prey to predator, and it begins with where you point your pupils and how you process the light, because money is attracted to clarity and vision and resolution, and it is repelled by confusion and distraction. You must treat your attention as holy capital, and you must refuse to spend it on anything that does not increase your genetic capital, because every hour of scrolling is a tombstone for a business idea that died because you didn't have the visual RAM to process it, and you are currently in a war for your own eyes, and the algorithm is your opponent. The architect understands that the wealthy do not watch, they are watched, and the money flows from the many who look to the few who are looked at. So by moving from consumption to production, you are moving from the observing class to the observed class, and you are harvesting the capital of the many for your own citadel. This requires a surgical detachment from the screen addiction and a reprogramming of the visual cortex to seek out asymmetry and arbitrage in the physical world until you start to see the world as a chessboard where every move has a financial consequence, and you realize that money is everywhere, and it is actually harder not to make money once you can see the logic of the game. You must implement a retinal fast where you purposefully avoid all fast-cut media until your brain's baseline is restored and you can find joy in the slow build of a complex project, because success is a high-resolution process that requires sustained focus and low-frequency dopamine that only the architect can maintain. The soft man is a broke observer who knows everything but owns nothing because his brain is too full of information sludge to execute on real information, while the architect is empty and hungry and focused and deadly in his pursuit of the citadel. By the time you reach the end of this protocol, you must have crystallized your resolve to execute with violent speed and cold intent, and you must never return to the digital slum of cheap content because it is the ghetto of the mind, and you were born to be an architect of the future. You must realize that dopamine is the energy of action, and action is the language of the sovereign, and by conserving your dopamine, you are increasing your will and expanding your territory until the simulation yields to your architecture. The money you seek is currently invisible to you because your neural bandwidth is 100% occupied by the noise, but once you mute the noise, the signal will become blindingly clear, and you will see the millions as mathematical inevitabilities rather than fantasies. You are now operating with full vision, and the dopamine devaluation is reversed, and you are the sovereign operator of your own biological and financial empire. Execute the high-friction strategy today and watch as the meat remains ours while you become the architect of the millions. Proceed to the next immersion, proceed to the next conquest, proceed to the next boredom. The empire is waiting and the architect is ready. Execute.